All right. Hope you guys enjoyed the breakfast. Let's give it up for the guys that came in early. Eric, thank you, Danny, and your team. You guys are awesome servants. Thank you for doing that. This morning, we have a treat. We want to introduce you, if you don't know Mike already, or Michael, Mr. White. Michael has been with Eagles Nest for a bit. I'll let him tell you more about that. He actually went to Clemson, so he's allowed to wear that. He's not just a fair weather fan. He's a Clemson dude through and through. But Michael and Krista have come to us recently, and they've wanted to serve in youth. And so they've been working alongside myself and my wife and the other volunteers as we work with middle schoolers, Chris and Nadia Newbling and some others, and they've been a blessing to us. Most recently we had an opportunity to travel to Pennsylvania, and we went to an Orange Conference, which is the team that develops our curriculum for our youth, and Michael was able to go with us, and again, as he gets more and more plugged in, we appreciate your service to the youth and everything you and Krista are doing. I'll shut up and let you go.
All right, I want to say good morning to everybody. I actually train classes every day in my job, but I've never had a microphone, so I told them I was a little cool. I get a microphone today. I'm always in a small classroom. Just give you a little about myself, my testimony. My name is Michael White. We've been in Delaware close to 4 years now, and I was born in Louisiana, 1981. My dad was military when I was born, so we didn't move too many places like a lot of people do. I lived in Alaska 3 years, in Georgia. He retired there, so I lived there for probably 3/4 of my life. So when people ask me where I'm from, I just say Georgia. And it's southern Georgia, Valdosta, Georgia, near Moody Air Force Base. I'm married, have a wonderful wife, beautiful wife, Krista. I met her while I was in grad school, and I'll get a little more into that, and I have 3 kids. Gracie, she's 2. Gabe's 2, Gracie's 4, and Gavin is 6. And they're all fixing to have birthdays in the next 2 months. So they'll be moving up a year. So they're all 2 years apart. We stay busy. The house is busy, but it's always fun, and we love it. We've been to Eagles Nest close to a year now. We actually came to Eagles Nest back when we first moved to Delaware. The first year, for about 8 months, we loved it. But the only reason why we went to another church is because we live up in Felton, and so we went to a church in Canton, so it was a little closer. And it was a great church, but we tried to get involved there, and things just didn't work out. Some things happened, and so I said, you know what? Why did we leave Eagles Nest in the first place? So we came back because we really loved it here. We're actually trying to get involved here. We were participating in things when we were here first off, so we just came back and we really enjoy it. And the drive's not bad at all. I tell everybody, I said, if you have a 30-minute drive, it's worth it when you have a great church and great fellowship, and you can get involved. So that's definitely a key part. So I'll start off. How did I get saved? So my salvation, I grew up in a church. When you're in the South, and you grow up in Louisiana and you grow up in Georgia, you're in the Bible Belt. So, there's churches everywhere. There's church on every street corner. And there's a lot of Baptist churches. My grandfather's an independent Baptist preacher. He's passed away now for a few years, but he was an independent Baptist preacher. So every time we went to Louisiana, we always went to his church. We always heard those messages. He had a small church of about 30 people, but it was always good to go and hear his messages. And he was real strict. So I grew up in a real strict environment in church. Me and my wife have talked to Pastor Bob about this and things, but some people have different terms for it. We just call it independent Baptist, where they're like, you can't go to the movies, and women have to wear certain things, and you must do this and you must do that, and it's real cut and dry. And actually at the Orange Conference, we had a speaker that he had a great term that I thought was really cool that I've never heard before. And it doesn't sound cool, or sound good, but he said, most people grow up and they have a jerk God. They have a jerk God. They have a God that they feel like that they have to live up to, or that's always looking down on them, or that's just there to make you feel bad when you do something, or that you're not good enough, or that you have to abide by certain rules and laws all the time. And that's not the truth, And it took me so long to kind of realize that, and I'm still realizing that because I'm young. I'm only 38, so I got a lot of life to live, and a lot of journey to go. But I thought that was a great way he put that, because that's kind of how me and my wife grew up. She grew up in Georgia her whole life too, and she was Church of God, Pentecost, so she went through a little bit harder than I did. At least I moved around, had a little bit more diversity in the church. So, sitting in my house one day in Georgia, my dad was on, and he was over in the desert. That was during the first Desert Storm Wars around 92, or Desert, I think it was Desert Storm. We had watched the war start over there on TV, and he was loading weapons on A-10s at that time, during that time. He was in the military. Now I was just sitting there one night, and you constantly hear messages all the time when you're little, and I was 11 years old, going on 12 years old at the time. And I think this was around October, if I believe, and I just always heard messages about, hell, fire, brimstone. Make sure you get saved. You don't want to go to hell. It's a terrible place. And all the Christmas, they had things at Halloween where they would, churches would set up haunted houses that would resemble hell and the tribulation and going through that. And at the end, they have a little message in service. So it kind of scare you. And at the end, you're like, whew, oh man, there's some light at the end of the tunnel. So that's kind of how we grew up. So I was sitting in my room thinking about it one day, and I just broke down crying, and it was a really strong time for me because my dad was gone, and you're 11 years old, and sorry, I get a little emotional because I really believe that night is the night that I accepted the Lord. Now, a few days later, 5 days later, I went to church and actually said the prayer with my pastor, and it went down front. But it was a strong night. I just went to my mom and broke down crying, and we prayed together, and we just had a really great night that night. A really great night. So, sorry guys. So that's when I received the Lord, and it was a great time. It was a great time. But again, as I got older and I started to grow and started to become a teenager, I realized all I did was just punch my ticket. I just punched my ticket to get into heaven. Shortly after that, 3 to 4 years after that, I was going on 14. Actually did something I tell people about, but I think it's important, is I got mixed up with some wrong friends in the neighborhood that we moved to, and we actually went to Kmart and we stole just a bunch of baseball cards. We literally wiped them out, hundreds of baseball cards. So we were collecting cards at the time. We thought it was cute, funny, that we were getting away with it, that we could go there, get home, give them all to all our buddies, take all the best ones, And that really hit me hard. God really put a sense of conviction in me at that time, because every day I just felt something pulling on me saying, you know what, that's not right. And you need to tell somebody, and you need to get right, and you need to tell your parents. And just a little voice telling me every day. So I went on for about 6 months, and I didn't say anything. I didn't tell anybody. Only me and my buddy knew. It was just me and him. And so finally, I just told my parents one night. It's about 6 months later. Of course, they were disappointed, but they said, what'd you do with the cards? And actually, by that time, being scared, I didn't want to go back to Kmart or anything, so I just gave them all away, actually, to other people. Because, being 14, I just felt like, that's one way of kind of getting rid of it. And that's what happened. And I went to church, and, I prayed about it and asked for God for forgiveness down front. But, I go to say that as in, I see so many young people today, especially working with youth, that a lot of things, they get saved, but they don't know, there's nobody there to guide them. And that was kind of my thing. I know I was in church, and I was around youth, and I was around youth groups, but you really didn't have that person there that was really there to help you and guide you, that wasn't always saying, preaching the Bible in more of a, come down on you type of way, like a jerk God of a way, So I think as I've grown up and I've realized that's not what I want to do to our youth. Like when I've been around youth before in Scouts, and I've helped with camps, and I've helped with a lot of things in church as I've gotten older, and I realized that I really try to be understanding when I deal with other people, even adults. I train adults every day. They're a lot older than I am, and I just try to be understanding of where they come from, who they are, what's their story, because sometimes people just know what's the right path or the right way, or just someone to open up to get them to that point. So definitely faced some hardships after I got saved and went through that, and then also I just felt that conviction. So that's a strong thing. I always urge people, I'm like, if you feel that, that's the Lord talking to you. Like Bob says many times in his services, maybe you don't hear something, or there's not a direct sign, but you can feel it. And you can feel God tugging on your heartstrings all the time. And I know that applies to all of us. Even issues I've gone through in our marriage with my wife, you can feel God telling you, hey, you can't do this on your own. You can't battle this on your own. You can't pray about it on your own and get over it. You have to go to somebody. You have to seek help. You have to make it known. And I think that's a huge thing nowadays. That's really hard for people to do. And I just encourage everyone to do that if you're struggling, because it really helps. As I got into high school and college, I actually rededicated my life my junior year in high school. I was working out with youth ministries at my high school, just kind of helping with activities here and there. Felt like I needed to do that just from going through school. There's a lot of pressure schools. I transitioned through some private to public and all that, and really didn't enjoy high school, so I was just ready to get out of high school and get to college, and I was kind of a negative outlook, but I really was, so I kind of knuckled down and got into college, and college was a little bit better experience. I got into the wrong crowd in college right off the bat. I made good grades, but I was going out for a year or two, doing all the stuff college people do, partying, staying out late, sleeping over people's houses, don't know where you're at. All that stuff that's not good. Luckily, I didn't do it for very long. I kind of wised up, and some other friends didn't, so I kind of wised up and said, you know what, this is kind of the same scene, the same people. I'm not really doing anything. I'm not bettering myself, so I kind of got out of that. But I still went out because I was there for my friends, so I was always the DD, or, I was always the guy that was, had a right mind about himself, so I still went out at least so I can be there and hang out, but to, make sure people got home that I really cared about and had good friends at that time. But even going through college, my degree, I felt like I was kind of, when I went to college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, so I went to sports medicine. That's how I ended up, getting to Clemson eventually, but I went to sports medicine, went through the program. But I wasn't really happy, I wasn't really happy with that. I felt like it wasn't really what God was telling me to do as far as like my career path. I just kind of did it because I was kind of like, my parents that want me to go to the military. My dad's not in the military, so I just went to college and went into something that halfway sounded cool. So I got out, got the degree, but I wasn't happy. I was like, I kind of made subpar grades because I goofed off a lot in college. And also, I just skipped out. I just didn't do stuff. And I look back now and I kick myself in the butt, because I could have made so much more of that experience, than when I was there. And that's another thing I always try to tell people is make the most out of your experiences. You may be going something that you don't want to, or that you kind of feel like you're pushed into, or that you don't really care about. But now, today as an adult, and being married and having children, I always try to make the best of that. I always say, okay, this may not be the greatest thing, or I might not be into it, but what are the positives out of that? Because that was one thing that I missed out on. I feel like I really could have helped people also getting into church and been there more for my church. I was going to church, but it was like every other Sunday or once a month type of deal because I was just lazy and not doing what I was supposed to do. But then one thing I could always say about that going through college is that my parents always instilled a hard work ethic in me. So that's what kind of kept me straight, is even though I didn't do well in college and I wasn't really happy, I always worked a lot. And I think working a lot is what kept me a little grounded, because I bought all my own vehicles and paid most of my own bills when I was younger, because my parents weren't well off enough to do that for me. Even though they're great parents, so I had to work a lot for my own stuff. Not like a lot of the millennials and stuff nowadays who, not a bad thing, but they get a lot handed to them. I can even say that because I'm right on that cusp. But and I tell people, I'm like, it's good for them to work, it's good for kids to work, it's good for people to get out, get grounded, learn what it's like about responsibility. Because I did at a very young age, and it was great. And I think that's what kept me halfway grounded as I went through my college years, is working, and it kept me out of a lot of trouble. But as I graduated VSU, I went Ball State University, that's where I went to college at, got my degree. I went to Clemson. And I got into Clemson, again, I think that was God's path again. And that's kind of like my little theme here of my testimony is God's plan for my life, because I didn't know where I was going. I was getting out of my degree, I had to do an internship. I didn't put in the work to find an internship. I was like, I got an internship coming up for 4 months, what do I do? I haven't researched anywhere, I haven't looked in anything, and I was like, man, I gotta come up with something. Well, one of my buddies that was in the class before me, coming up through, went to Clemson, and he called me back and he said, have you picked the internship site? And I said, no, I haven't picked the internship site. And he's like, what about Clemson? I'm like, yeah, whatever. I didn't even really know what University of Clemson was at that time. I kept up with sports and stuff, but I really didn't keep up with it as much as some people do. I was more of an outdoors guy, camping, fishing, hunting, and all that. So I was into sports, but not as much as some. So I went to a Bassmasters Classic in Charlotte that year in the summer. And I called the head guy at Clemson, and I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing an internship at your school, in your department, sports medicine department. When can I come set up an interview? And he said, well, why don't you come right now? And it was on a Friday. And this was like 10 o'clock in the morning. He said, we leave by 3 o'clock. And I'm like, right now? And he's like, sure. He's like, I'm going to be busy in the fall. We got football. Why don't you just come right now? And we'll set it up because this was going to be coming for the following spring. And I said, well, I don't have interview gear. I'm like, I don't have any shirts and ties. I don't have anything prepared. I don't have anything with me. He said, I don't care. You can come in shorts and t-shirt. We're all in shorts and t-shirt because we're at camp. Just come on and interview. So we jumped in the car, barely made it there at like 2:45 before they left. ran in there. His name was Danny Poole. Met with him and his assistants. Had a great interview. Had a great time talking. Talked for about 2 hours. Left, and that's what set it up for Clemson. So again, just a crazy opportunity that presented itself. But I also look back and really am proud and excited that I listened to God at that, because I was going to turn it down. I wasn't going to go there on a Friday and try to bust 3 hours down the road or 2.5 hours down the road to go to an interview. I was like, whatever, I'll just pick someplace else. But I was like, no, you know what? I need to go. And again, I just felt something telling me I need to go. You need to go. You need to go to that. So I went to that following spring, got into the school, got into all the paperwork. Everything worked out very smoothly. I mean, so smoothly. I tell people, don't even go by what happens to me, because it worked out too smoothly, And I was really thankful for that, because I knew it was God putting me there. And I had a great experience at Clemson. I worked very hard there. I made straight A's there while I was in grad school. I had 2 or 3 jobs. Well, I was actually 2 jobs I was getting paid for. A third job I wasn't getting paid for, but it was still a job. So I worked very hard for those 3 years. Up at 4 in the morning, didn't get done till 9 or 10 at night. I did that for 3 years straight, and only came home for 2 months during the summer. And during those 2 months, I worked at Chick-fil-A. So good old Chick-fil-A. My dad was the one operator at Chick-fil-A in Lake Park, Georgia. And that was also a path in my life. Chick-fil-A, believe it or not, I met my wife there, so I believe that's why God put me there. So, because I was working for my dad, he was owner operator, I was like, yeah, it's just a little job, come back to the summer for, I was, put a little cash in my pocket before I went back to Clemson. But then my wife was working there the whole time. A funny story is she was 7 years younger than I am. So when she was there, she was 16 years old, I was 23. And I was like, I didn't even give her the time of day. I'm like, she's 23 years old. She's 16, I'm 23. Can't date a 16-year-old. I'll go to jail. There's no way that's going to happen. So I knew who she was, and we just kind of kept in touch and talked. And then she got 18, and I was sitting there one day. This was 1 week before I left to go to Clemson for my grad school, because the Lord worked that out to where I made a smooth transition right into grad school, because I was getting along with the staff, and I did a great job, which was a great opportunity. And again, that was seamless, so I don't tell people go by my example, because it was too easy the way I got in. But again, I think that was God's plan, is to get into grad school, because He did make it easy. There was no struggles there, and it kind of all, when I look back, fit pieces of the puzzle just fit right together, even though you don't realize it at the time. And so I got into grad school, right a week before I left for grad school, which I know was going to be very busy. I just called her up, sky blue. My parents were like, "What?" Because I didn't date a lot of girls, so. The whole time I went to VSU and was going to my internship at Clemson, I barely dated 1 or 2 girls. I was just that guy that just hung out with his buddies and did all this stuff, 1 year I went to the Springs down in Florida and Georgia about 30 times in one summer. Had a great friend that passed away drowning on one trip I didn't go on, so that was a really tough thing I had to deal with growing up. So I did a lot of stuff like that. And so when I called just to grow up on my own, it was like lightning struck. My parents were like, whoa, what's going on? This is crazy. You're actually going out with a girl? So I was like, yeah, and I called her up. So we went out, and that just set the tone. And I just knew straight from the beginning. I was like, hey, and I know people say you don't know, or some people don't believe in that. But I'll tell you, it's true. When you're with somebody and you're supposed to be with them, you feel it right off the bat. I felt it with Krista right off the bat. It's our first date. I love being around her. She just has something about her that I just want to be around her. I enjoyed being around her. We got along. We had the same beliefs. She was Church of God and we were Baptist. Our parents gave us a lot of grief, more than probably should have received during our 3 years of being together. But the one thing we knew we believed in was salvation. And that's the one thing that kept us together, because we were like, okay, even though you believe in get a little crazy in service and doing some things I wouldn't do, that I felt really out of place, because when I went to her church services, they were way different than church services I was used to. So as far as that goes, our 2 cultures of worshiping the Lord are a lot different, They did stuff that I just sat there in the back of the church and was like, I'll just let y'all do y'all's thing. I'll sit back here and I'll wait till it's all done, because it got pretty wild in there. It got pretty wild. And then in my services, she was like falling asleep. How do you stay up in these services? I don't know how. Why do you go to a church like this? It's so boring. So that was interesting in itself, because we joked around a lot about that with each other, our 2 different cultures there. But the one thing we always kept the same, no matter what anybody said, and believe me, we received a lot of grief from both sides, is we just believe in the salvation of the Lord. And we knew that when we had a family and we wanted to raise kids, that's all that really mattered, was believing in the Bible and salvation. So we kind of put that aside. We dated for 2 years, got engaged for 1 year. We got married as soon as I graduated at Clemson. We got married like a week later because I was, I'm applying over 100 jobs. I've had a few interviews. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get this nice job right out of grad school, paying really good money. I got my master's degree. I got all this experience, working athletics, blah, blah, blah. It didn't happen at all. Okay? Didn't happen. Of course, I thought I had my plan, right? My plan wasn't the plan that God wanted. So we got married. Had to move back to Georgia, back to Valdosta, which I didn't want to do, okay? Had to live with my parents, which I didn't want to do because we didn't have a place, all right? Because that wasn't the plan. The plan was to get a job somewhere in Clemson or somewhere else and have our own place, right? So I went back to work at a restaurant for $7 an hour, cooking food in the back. And I'll tell you, it's a humbling experience. I tell people it's very humbling to go through all that schooling and think you're going to get a good job and you got to come back and work at a restaurant for $7 an hour. And I did that for 6 months, and I worked 70 hours a week just to make money so me and Krista, could pay our bills and be married, and we live with my parents. So after about 4 months of living with my parents, we moved out, got our own place, and that was wonderful, little one-bedroom apartment. And then, we kind of went through there. And the way we wound up in Delaware is we bought a house eventually, and I got a job at the hospital there. I finally got my foot in the door. Krista got a job first, and then the same manager that hired her hired me 30 days later, and I had no clue I was even going to get hired. I didn't even really submit a resume or an application. He just knew of me and said, hey, your wife does a great job. Do you want to come to work here also? And I said, do what? He said, pharmacy. I'm like, pharmacy? Okay, I know nothing about pharmacy, but I'll go to work in the pharmacy. So I got a job as a pharmacy, in the pharmacy, became a pharmacy tech a year later, took the test, all that good stuff. And his name was Mike Ruiz. And Mike Ruiz played a pretty integral part in me and Krista's life. I mean, he was another saved brethren. He was saved. He went to church, which was a great thing. So he was a great manager. It related to us well. Being in a business setting, you don't get that lots of times. A lot of people have different views. They're not saved, so it's hard to speak to people about that without meeting some resistance. And he would end up playing a bigger part than I would know, because not only did he get our foot in the door there, and we worked together for 3 years while we were there, have a 7-on, 7-off, which was wonderful, but allowed us to buy our house and allowed us to get our feet on the ground. And then we had Gavin, and then we had Gracie. But when we had Gracie, we were going under. I mean, even though both our families are in Valdosta, people always ask, why did you leave Georgia when both your families are in the same town? Well, that sounds great, and it is on some aspects, but on some aspects, it's really tough to have both families in the same town, especially when both families have opposing views of religion, okay? Especially when both families are pulling you in two different directions of what they want. And I love my parents, and I love my in-laws, but most of the time people don't think about it, but when they wanted time, it was their time. It wasn't time that really helped us out when we were young and we were struggling. So we both worked full-time. We had kids in daycare. And when Gracie was born, we just weren't making it. I mean, we were working hard. And I thought, okay, I'm not only working full-time, but she's working full-time. But I'm just going to have to get a second job, or she's going to have to get a second job. So we started applying for jobs. I applied for many transfers in the hospital. And over a year's time, nothing happened. Nothing. Didn't get no interviews to transfer. And we were going under. And I was getting really scared. And she was getting scared. And I was like, what are we going to do? Plus, our families were just causing us a lot of problems that gave us some marital problems. Even though the marital problems were between me and her, there's marital problems because of our families. So she was getting stressed out. I was getting stressed out. She was talking about, I can't take this anymore, I want to leave. I was like, we can't do that because it's not problems between me and you. It was problems with all the outside pressures of life, So I was trying to hold it together and keep us afloat. And we just prayed a lot about it. And every night I would just sit there, I didn't formally pray. I would just sit there on the couch, sometimes the TV off, and I would just think, what are we going to do? Are we going to lose our house? Are we going to lose a car? So we couldn't make our bills. And we were working pretty much as hard as we could without getting a second job, which we didn't see each other that much anyways. So I was like, if we do that, when are we going to see each other? And it was tough. And the same manager that hired us, in the pharmacy, he had left at this point. He left the hospital at this point. He called me back. He said, hey, Mike, I heard you've been looking for some jobs. And I said, yeah. I really have. And he went into consulting at that time. Consulting was a big thing in the healthcare industry, still is, 5-10 years ago. Everybody was going to consulting because it was, you travel, it's big money, it's a good job, even though it's lucrative because you don't know how long the contracts are going to last. It's all about the money. And he called me and he said, hey, man, I've been in consulting for 3 years now, and would you mind consulting? And I said, I don't know. I said, what does it involve? And he said, well, you got to fly out every week. You're only home 2 days a week, but you'll make good money, and you work for a great company, and it might get your foot in the door somewhere else. And I said, I just don't know, Mike. And his name was Mike also, actually. And I said, I just don't know, Mike. I said, I don't know if I could do that. You know, it's a lot of time away from the family. It's a big risk to take. But I said, you know what company? So he told me the company. It was Total Med IT. I put my application in, and then nothing happened for 3 months. So now I'm really getting worried because we're starting to get behind on bills. Things are racking up. Families are putting more pressure on us. And I'm like, okay, something's got to happen. We either got to move and sell our house and try to move into something smaller and get a second job at the same time. I mean, it was really getting a lot of pressure, especially with our 2 young kids that we had. And then one day I just received a phone call. It's outside in the yard with the kids, got a phone call. And again, I thought everything, you know, was just not going to work out. I thought we were just going to have to do the worst case scenario possible. And that company called. And I said, hey, we got your application, you know, from a few months ago. Sorry, we're just getting around to it. We've been busy. We've been hiring a lot of people. I said, okay. They're like, how would you like to start? And I'm like, what? Start what? And they're like, you know, being a consultant. I was like, okay, what is involved? They're like, it's a 4-month contract to Delaware. And I said, Delaware? I was like, I know it's a state, but where's that at? And they're like, oh, it's in the Northeast. I'm like, oh, okay. And they're like, yeah, it's at Bay Health Medical Center in Delaware. You'll be doing a lot of the same stuff you do now. So you'll be making a lot of online models, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, okay, cool. And they're like, but it's 4 months. I'm like, 4 months? I can't do this for 4 months. I got a family. I'm going under in bills. What if it doesn't even last 4 months? You know, I just heard a story of a guy that took one and it ended in a month. Then he was out of job. It's very lucrative. They can end it. They can cancel your contract anytime they want to, for whatever reason. And I was like, I don't know. I said, let me think about it. So I got off the phone, discussed with my wife, called him back the next day, and I said, sure, I'll take it. I just feel like God will say, this is our door. This is your door. It's not the door you want. It's not the door that you planned on. It's not the door that you thought was the best option. And there's a risk because it's 4 months. And you have a family and you're going under. So are you going to take it or are you not? And I felt like he was telling me that really, again, pulling on my heart. It's not a voice I didn't hear. I just felt that gut, that heart pull. And I was like, okay, I'll do it, you know. And then a week later, I was flying to Delaware. Literally, they got everything set up that well, and they were a great company. And I flew to Delaware, and I was flying out every week. And I did that in a 4-month contract, turned into a 6-month contract, turned into an 8-month contract. So the Lord really took care of us. I mean, beyond belief. We were making great money, didn't blow it. That's one thing I tell people that start making good money. Even my friends say, are my age or younger, I say, listen, we live the same way we did, even though I was making twice or 3 times that. Because you know where you were at, and you know where you don't want to be at again. And so I said that, and I think that applies to a lot of people, and I was like, listen, even though I'm making over 100 grand a year, I'm living like I'm making 40 grand a year, like we were, because I was like, I don't want to get in that situation again. So we were able to save up a lot of money, which was a blessing. We never had that much in our savings account before. We were able to tithe better. We gave more money to youth programs, to the church. We were able to, you know, just boost everything we had, get really caught up, really set up. And then contract was coming to an end. And I was like, what do I do? And then Bay Health, my managers here were really great. They're still my managers today. And they said, well, do you want optional full-time appointment? And I was like, yeah, that's cool. But I mean, I never thought about moving, you know, like moving all the way to Delaware. I did a big move with my dad from Alaska to Georgia, you know, one time. And that's the only big move I've ever done. I was young. So I said, yeah, okay. So I interviewed, and we negotiated for a couple weeks, and I took the job. And Chris has never been up here. She's never been up here. So I couldn't get her up here in the time in the 8 months I was here. So I went back and talked to her, and I said, before I take it, are you sure? She's like, yeah, I guess. You know, again, it was another door that opened, and I was like, this is a door. You know, do we go through it? Do we trust the Lord, or do we not? And maybe, you know, because everybody was telling me, just wait for another contract. You know, I was working with 6 contractors here at Bay Health. Everybody here at that time in IT was half contractors or consultants, and they were like, just wait for another contract. You'll get one. Don't take full-time at Bay Health. I was, and they weren't saying that to be negative. They were just saying, you know, keep the big money. Go with another contract. Travel somewhere else. And I was like, yeah, I don't know. You know, I don't know. And I was thinking, I was like, you know, but I've been away from my family a lot for 8 months. My son was having issues with me being gone because he didn't understand. He was only 4 and 5 at the time. And he didn't understand why I was leaving so much. And he was starting to have a lot of nervous issues, a lot of anxiety. He wasn't sleeping at night. My little girl was getting that way. And I said, no, you know, I said, money's not everything. I said, I'll go back to not making that much money now that we're set up and the Lord has got us to this point and we're not struggling. And I said, I'll go back to full time because that's where my family needed to go. We needed to get out of Georgia. We were still having all the pressures from our family. We're still having issues. It just a great job has helped out a little bit. So we took the job, went back, got set up, moved here. And it's been the best thing ever, really. I mean, you know, I moved up here and people are like, why Delaware and this and that. But until you know, you just don't know everybody's story, and that's what I tell people. You don't know everybody's story. And so some people like me, you know, I've had a lot of people say negative things to me about Bay Hill and say negative things to me about Delaware. But I'm like, but when you come from where we came from and you struggle and God puts you in the situation that you're in, because we took those doors, we could have easily have shut that down. I had everybody telling me not to take those doors. But we, as a couple, prayed about it and realized we needed to do that, and that's what brought us here. So I tell everybody, just don't make any hasty decisions when you have opportunities. Think about it, because we've loved it up here. We've been tight-knit as a family. Me and my wife have grown. She's been able to stay home the whole 4 years as a stay-at-home mom. She's never had to work anymore, which is awesome. She's been home with our kids. We had a third child, Gabe, while we've been up here. We built our first house. Just a lot of great things, you know. And, you know, the money's a little bit tighter than it used to be, of course, but we managed that, and that's fine. But he brought us to this point, I really believe, because he knew we needed that. He knew we needed an avenue to become stronger as a family and to grow in him, because we weren't really involved in our churches back at home because they were so different, you know. Their ideology was so different. And so we didn't want to get involved in either or, because we just would have seen a lot of even more grief than what we were getting. So we came up here and we've been involved in churches. We were involved in the last church we were in, and now we're involved in Eagles Nest with the youth. And I really think that's the two biggest things in my life that it's been, is conviction and then God's journey and just opening those doors. And I know I got a lot of journey left. I'm a young guy. But I think for anybody my age or even younger or older, a lot of these things can apply. Because it's just taking those opportunities when they come and listening to God. Because if I wouldn't have done that, there's no telling where we'd be at today. I don't know where we'd be at as a person. I don't know where I'd be at with my wife or my kids or my family. But we love it up here. It's been great in Delaware. It's so funny because everybody's like, you know, Valdosta, Georgia, everything's 3 to 4 hours away from me. It's Georgia, it's a big state. So we live in southern Georgia. Everybody thinks Atlanta, but that's a small little piece of Georgia. We live in southern Georgia, was about 4 hours south of Atlanta. And so when I come up here, we go all the time. You know, every weekend, we have such a great life up here. I mean, we still struggle a little bit, but we go somewhere on the weekends with the kids. And to us, it's close. So 30 minutes here, 45 minutes there, hour here. It's funny because I talk to people at work, and they're like, "You drove 45 minutes to that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah." They're like, "You're crazy." I'm like, "No." Because I would have to drive 3 hours to it back at home, you know. So again, I really think that was a big part of my life there, and growing up, and even dealing with issues now. We've had a few issues in our marriage, and I won't go into a lot of detail on that. And we've been seeing Bob about that, and he's really been a great pastor. But this church has been a great church. I mean, we feel welcome to this church. I was going to tell everybody, if you have people, try to invite them to Eagles Nest, get them to church. Bob's been a great pastor in helping us out. We felt welcome here more so than any church we've been to in this area. That's why we want to get involved. I have helped with youth ministries before. I've been a Scouts for 10 years. I made Eagle Scout. I helped with Scouts. After that, I was a Scout Master for a while. And I also helped a lot of fish camps. We called it Galicia Fish Camp back at home, which was for ages 10 through 16 for girls and boys. I helped out a lot of that with 3 years with ministering to kids and taking them fishing every day. And all of them got a prize and, you know, all that at the end of the week. So it was really good. But I appreciate your time here today. I just want to read a couple Bible verses I had picked out here. One is from Proverbs, and this is about opportunity in your life, because I feel like that's the biggest thing that's led us. But it's Proverbs 3, 3, and then 5 and 6. So Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. And all that way, so this is verse 5. Trust in the Lord with all thy heart, and lean not to thine own understanding. And all thy ways acknowledge him, and he shall direct thy paths. And I didn't always do that. But once I started to learn to do that, even when I didn't know if it was the right thing, that's the right thing to do. That's the thing that God wants you to do. And now that I've done that, if I'm getting older and going and developing more in the Lord and growing in my faith, I just know that it becomes easier and easier once you do that. And I think that's a huge verse, even though it's mentioned a lot. That's definitely a verse that can apply to anyone, and that's easy to follow if you just pray about it and ask the Lord to guide you. And that's what we kind of did, even though we probably didn't do it enough. You know, he still was merciful and blessed us in that. And then the next couple verses I want to read is Hebrews. And this is just about conviction, you know, and knowing when the Lord's pulling on your heartstrings, whether it's to do something great, whether it's not, you know, whether it's something after you did that was wrong. You know, everybody speaks about the wrong things, but I like to focus on the things that are good too. A lot of people don't do that enough, you know, the positive. You know, just always know that when you feel a conviction to volunteer, or you maybe didn't do something, you're struggling in your marriage, or you're struggling with a friend, or something you did at work, just to seek Him and go to Him and confess it. Because let me tell you what, it felt great to get off my chest. I know that. And to know that the Lord actually knows about it for me, and I confessed it to someone else, and I have accountability now. And that's a huge thing. And the verse here is Hebrews 13, 18 through 21. Pray for us, for we trust we have a good conscience and all things, willing to live honestly. But I beseech you rather to do this, that I may restore you the sooner. Now the God of peace, that brought again from the dead our Lord Jesus Christ, the great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you perfect in every good work to do His will, working in you that which is well pleasing in His sight, through Jesus Christ, to whom glory forever and ever. Amen. And that just there, I think, applies to, again, doing His will, going to Him, knowing that He's there for you is a huge thing. Because I didn't always think that. I thought I could get over a lot of things on my own, even through my college years and even through my years being married. And once I finally started just giving up to myself and let the Lord take over, things got a lot better. And we can see the results of that, especially looking back now. So I appreciate your time. Again, this is Michael White. If you see me in church, say hi. I like to say hi. I'm a Southerner, so if you're having a bad day, I'll say hi, and I'll at least speak. We get some weird looks. And thank y'all. Appreciate it.
All right, give it up for Michael. Thanks for sharing. Mr. Funk? I'm going to text a bunch of your friends if
There you go.
Well, listen, when I first met Michael, the first thing I asked him was, "You're from Manhattan, New York, right?" Because that accent was just so clear. And he said, "No, man, I'm from Georgia." Thank you for sharing. Everybody's got a story. And the more we can take time to get to know one another, get connected to one another, there's a piece of his story that you probably connected to. There were several pieces that I connected to that we could chat about later. But every single guy around the table has a story. God has knit that story in their lives. And so we need to take the time to spend with one another. Let me share something with you. Last night I was at Gideon's International Dinner, and this gentleman came up. He was also from the southern neck of the woods. It was a Tennessee boy, and he was sharing his story of how the Gideons had ministered to him, and it really spoke to me last night. So I just want to tell you his story real briefly. This guy grew up in a backwoods Tennessee, by his definition, family. His father drank a lot, was never really much of a dad. He had a mom that kind of kept him and his brothers kind of together. But his mom passed when he was 11 years old. And so he went from having somewhat of a normal life with his mom and dad to a dad that was drunk all the time, that just kind of partied. And him and his brothers at age 11 began to join him, drinking, smoking weed, doing all this stuff. And basically, he created a life for himself that was addicted to drugs. When he was a teenager, he ended up getting in a fight in a bar. He was drunk, and he ended up shooting a guy and killing him. And so he went on the run for a little bit. I think he said it was about 7 days. And he said it was one of the scariest moments of his life when you're watching the news and they're looking for you. And you're like, what do I do? So he ended up turning himself in, and he ended up going to prison. And through this story, he saw some suits walking in the jail one day, and he was like, "Oh, a lawyer, that's what I need." But it was the Gideons. And the Gideons were walking in this prison to hand out Bibles to the men that were in that place and to share the gospel with each one of the guys. And at first he said he ran from them, but after a while he got a hold of one of those Bibles and he started to read it. And he followed the Romans road in the back of it, and he gave his life to Jesus Christ. And in about 10 months, as he's in prison, he had drastically changed, committed his life, and he says, what could I do? I was in prison, so I had to give everything up. But when he got out, he actually changed his whole course of his life. It was a miraculous story how he got released. He was supposed to be convicted for years and years and years, and he got out in 8 months and was released through the Holy Spirit's work. And today, he's actually a Gideon. But when he first got out, he said he went to church, and he kept that story. He hid that story. He didn't want anybody to know he was a murderer. He's like, most people are like talking about the 10 Commandments. He's like, yeah, I did all of them except for one of them. And he's like, I did all of them. Every single one of them. I violated God's commands, including murder. And he said that he didn't want people to know that aspect of his story. And one Sunday, they had a Gideon team come in. And he was like, oh yeah, thanks God for that reminder. And he watched them come in, do their presentation, how they shared the gospel with people, handed out Bibles. And he went up to them afterwards and he was like, oh, you guys are doing great. Here's some money, good job. And he had that conviction, but he didn't do anything about it. And year after year after year, he said it was about 5 years of this process, that the Lord was working on his heart and saying, hey, remember this, remember this. Until one day, he actually went up to him and he started talking with him, and his pastor came forward, and his pastor said, hey, I've got a guy that we'd be interested in being a liaison to the Gideons. And he turned to Derek and he put his hand on him. He's like, Derek. And Derek was like, no, man, not me. He talks like you, from Tennessee. And he ended up going to the pastor's office and he shared his story for the first time with another human being. He's like, listen, I know I've been serving in the church, I've been following God my whole life, but that's not true. 5 years ago, I was in prison for murder, and I did it. And this was my story. And the pastor said, well, that's your problem now, because I've already given your name to the Gideons. You got to go tell them. And so he goes to the next Gideon meeting, and what do you think they did? One of the guys stood up as he was sharing his story, and this is what hit me that might hit you this morning. He said, Derek, it ain't about you. It ain't about you. You're embarrassed by your past. You're embarrassed by the things that you've gone through. You're not cleaned up and you weren't in a good position, but Jesus met you there and he found you there, and that is your story. It ain't about you. And so when we do ministry together and we talk about doing ministry together, I try to keep that in the forefront of my mind, and it was a great reminder last night that it ain't about me either. It's about each one of the people that you come in contact with on a daily basis. Everyone's got a story. Everyone's got injury or pain, things that we regret. And it ain't about you. So in this next few moments, I want to take just a moment to ask you guys to consider something for me. We have 4 pillars that we're trying to develop as a men's group. We've just started talking about it. I've got a team of several of you guys that kind of come in and chat with me. And we've come up with, over the last few months, kind of a strategy. And we're looking at developing 4 pillars within this men's ministry that I'd like for each of you to consider this morning. First, it's fellowship. Obviously, we have to have meat. We have to have something to eat. We have to have something to do together, to have fun together. I think Dan came up with, flame throwing and some other grenade tossing. He had some good ideas. But activities that we can actually do together and have fun together, because that's part of the story. We need to get to know Mike and his story. We need to get to know Gary and Dan and Jay, each one of us, what our path is. But then we also talked about not just fellowship, but outreach. Outreach being something, what do we do to reach out to that guy that works at Bay Health, that guy that works at the school with you, or in your schools or in your neighborhoods? What do we do to reach out to them to present Christ? And the Gideon thing last night was a good reminder that we need to all be about that. And then service, we've got some guys that are really talented, that work on cars, work on yards, work on whatever, build things. What can we do as a service? And then growth, personal growth for each one of us is critically important. So we want to start talking about intentionally developing those 4 areas together. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to pass some things out at your table. You just spend 5 or 10 minutes this morning. Don't take a lot of time, but I want to get these in front of you, and there's going to be somebody at your table that's facilitating it. And they're just going to ask a couple quick questions, and then we'll wrap it up. Is that okay? Can we do that this morning? Sure. All right, here we go.